Hey everyone, welcome back to Career Journeys brought to you by Career Companion. We're with Leon from Aiven, and he's going to give us a bit of an overview of what he does, how he got to where he is, and also give us an insight to the business that he works at. So I'll let you take it away, Leon.
Alrighty, so I'm Leon. Job title is Senior Director of Production Engineering at Aiven. I've been with the business for about 4 years. What Aiven does is we're a data and AI platform, specifically dealing with open source services that we provide as services across multiple clouds. So most common question, why would I come to Aiven, not go to AWS? Because with Aiven, your data is your data. You can easily move it from AWS to Azure to GCP to one of the smaller cloud providers like DigitalOcean. And at the same time, we try and keep as much things open source as possible. So if you ever go that, we want to do this ourselves now, you can take your data and run it yourselves internally.
Perfect. And that will probably leave. Usually, this question comes up a bit more later down the track, but um, for yourself, when it came, like you said just before, why did I, choose this company? Was that a hard decision for you? And did you come up with it by yourself, or did you lean on other people to help you, I guess, come up with the solution?
To be honest, it was a hard decision. When I joined Aiven, so we're roughly, let's say, 500 people strong globally at the moment. And when I joined, it was less than 50. Um, and it was a difficult decision. I met one of the founders here in Sydney. The company was originally founded in Finland, and they were out in Sydney trying to build an SRE team. And I received an offer from them, and initially I actually said no. And the reason I said no is because I had a higher offer from a different company.
Mm.
And the different company was a consulting firm. I won't mention names. And I was like, it's a no brainer. You take the more money. But I've got a friend who is a CFO for a company here in Sydney. And I spoke to him and he said to me, look, it might sound like $10,000 a year is a lot of money, but it isn't. He said it's not going to change your life. It's like you're still going to live in the same place, drive the same car, do the same thing. Start looking at what sort of options you will have long term with the organization. And Ivan at the time had just received Series B funding, and it looked like they were on the up and up. I'd never worked in the SRE space before, so I thought, what a great opportunity. I really liked the founders, and so I was like, oh, well, at the time the market was super hot anyway. Let's just try it and see what happens. And that's how I ended up at Ivan.
Yeah, awesome. Sounds. I love how he, and that's what I usually say to quite a couple of people. I'm like, 10,000 sounds like a lot of money, but after tax, it's like you said, it's not life changing. And I love how he sort of mentioned, what are going to be the other opportunities and all of that. That sounds like a really good, solid conversation to have. And then for people, I guess, who are listening, and what do you mean by SRE? Just so they
Uh,
know.
Oh, so site reliability engineer. So I originally joined Ivan as an IC, individual contributor, as a site reliability engineer.
Yeah, and what does that consist of for somebody who still doesn't know what a site reliable
No, fair
engineer
enough. That is a good question. And I think when you talk to different companies, you'll find this is a very loose definition in any case.
is? Yeah.
So at Ivan, site reliability is a programming function where you are specifically responsible for monitoring the system and responding to unexpected failure. There should be no expected failure because that should obviously be fixed. Um,
Yeah.
and essentially, we build out the monitoring and we respond to incidents.
Mm. Okay, great. So quite a technical role. And then for people at home or wherever they're listening, can you explain the difference between your job that you're in now compared to what you started in when you were in the company?
You know, this is probably one of the conversations I have with people the most is that a lot of people think to progress in their technical career, they need to move into management,
Mm.
and it is literally a different job. It's when you go from individual contributor, from being a software developer to being a manager, you are starting to do a different job. And it's so hard actually just to find parallels between the two. When you're managing a team, it's really about finding the best in people and helping people be the best individual contributor they can be. But at the same time, you've got to carry that balance of you are also now representing the company's interest. I mean, all employees should always represent the company's interest, but as you become more senior in the business, that becomes more and more important that you are able to look at your executive team's vision and figure out what needs to happen to execute on that vision. Because as an IC, often it is definitely useful to understand the company vision, where the company's going, but you find yourself working on more short-term goals, where as you go up and up and up, your goals become way longer. So as a manager, you might be thinking a month to 3 months ahead. In a director position, probably more 3 to 6 months. By the time you're an executive, you have to start thinking years ahead and how are we going to get there. So it's a very different job. And I think important that people understand that if you enjoy being a programmer, maybe you don't want to be a manager. If you enjoy working with people, then definitely manager might be the thing for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Makes complete sense. Like you said, they're almost polar opposite. Um, for yourself, when it came down to a couple of things I want to touch on here. First of all, was how did the opportunity arise to actually step into that more of that managerial position? Was it something that you manifested yourself through certain things, or did it just happen to come to you?
I'll take a couple of years back here. So when I joined Ivan, I had managed teams before. Um, and probably, I don't know, for a good couple of years, I've been in some sort of technical lead role, but not necessarily a people manager role. So I did have some experience there. But how it came to be is that we were a small team in Sydney, and I think we were only 5 or 6 at the time, and the manager got another opportunity and moved on.
Yeah.
And the question was asked, like, would you be interested? And I said, sure, I'll give it a go. And my manager at the time still said to me, look, this can be temporary if you want it to be. And I was like, well, let's give it 6 months and then we talk about it again. And well, now it's almost 4 years later.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so obviously you enjoyed it, which is great.
Yeah, but look, I think an important thing for any sort of career advancement is that you do have to start doing things outside of your day-to-day work. Nobody is going to get promoted based on what they're currently doing. The reality is you have to stretch above and outside sometimes of what you're currently doing. Um, Definitely working at a company like Aiven, which is scaling up, it offers a lot more opportunity as to moving around in a business. And if you are looking for career development and have a lot of opportunity or want a lot of opportunity to move and try different things, chances are that smaller businesses may offer better opportunities.
Yeah.
But again, this is going to depend on the business.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So why don't we just rewind all the way back and sort of go from the start? I mean, when you were in high school, I always love to ask this question, what did you want to be and what did you want to do?
Man, so honestly, when I was in high school, I never really knew what I wanted to do. Um, I ended up leaving high school and I went to study marketing.
Okay.
And my first year of marketing was an absolute disaster. I failed so poorly that I was unable to continue with my degree,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I had to figure something else out. So marketing was definitely not the thing for me.
What made you decide to go to marketing then? It just seemed appealing at the time?
Well, to be honest, no. Because I had no clue. My mother was working at a large financial institution, and she always enjoyed talking to the marketing people. And she said to me, "Well, maybe you'll enjoy this." And I went, "Okay,
Nice.
fine. Okay, Mom, I'll do marketing." So,
Yeah, 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 yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
yeah. So that is essentially how I ended up there. And look, it was good. I did learn some interesting things about how marketing works and sales and all that, but ultimately not a career for me.
Mm. And then after, obviously, that would have been, I guess, in high school, didn't know what to do, done marketing. No, you don't want to do that. So that's great. You've ticked something off that you don't want to do. How then did you go about deciding what you wanted to do next?
So it's a bit of a two-phase answer. So in high school, I got my first computer, and internet wasn't quite as prevalent as it is today. And during school holidays, I was quite bored. And somewhere through all of that, I taught myself to program, and I joined the computer science studies at school. And so I got a basic rudimentary understanding of programming, but had no interest in doing it for a living. After I dropped out of marketing, I went, okay, I don't know what to do now, so I'm going to go deliver pizza for a while. And while doing this, I met a friend who was studying programming, and this was roundabout when the Y2K bug was a massive issue. Or at least everybody thought it was going to be a massive, massive issue. And when he finished his programming course, he got this massive job offer with relocation to London. And I was like, hang on, maybe there's something to this programming business.
Yeah, maybe I should do this for a living.
Yeah. So essentially, I went and did a formal kind of programming. It wasn't a degree at the time, it was a certification. And out of that, it was relatively easy at the time to get a programming job. And that's kind of how I got into, I guess, doing it as a career rather than just doing it for fun.
Ah, amazing. So I guess at the start it was had that whole feeling of, look, this is a hobby, don't want to do that, but then you saw what it could bring as a career, and then you're like, this is going to open up a lot of doors. And did you find it, so you didn't find it too hard to get your foot in the door in the first sort of role?
This is actually something that is difficult to answer because the internet wasn't so prevalent yet. Lots of jobs were offline, and weirdly, the way that I found my first job was like a two-prong approach. I was quite literally knocking on doors. So I had my CV printed out, and I went to companies that I knew had programmers, and I went, "Hey," and this would have been '99, and I would be like, "Hey, I don't suppose you're hiring," and I just dropped off CVs. But my very first job I actually found in the newspaper.
Oh, cool. No, but
So
I don't think people realize how nerve-wracking it can be, because I've done sales where I've done door knocking. I could only imagine how it must have felt, door knocking and selling yourself to be like, "Hey, I'm great. Here's my CV. Please hire me." That would have taken a lot of nerves to do that.
yeah, and look, I mean, sales is a numbers game. And I actually, at the time, my girlfriend was, and I believe she still does sales many years later, but she was very good at sales. And she's actually the one who encouraged me to go door to door. And she said, just speak to people. You never know what will happen. So,
Great. That was great
yeah.
advice. And then how long, because you mentioned that you're a software developer for quite some time and then stepped into more of that technical lead. I would love for you to sort of explain to people out there, because a lot of people just assume whenever you stick lead or manager on something, that means that you're automatically now managing people and you're not managing pieces of work. Can you sort of explain how you made that transition and the differences between that and, I guess, managing people?
Yeah, look, the first thing is to be a technical lead, you need to have a certain amount of, your opinion needs to have a certain amount of weight. And for your opinion to have a certain amount of weight, you do need to have relationships with the people you work with. So it's very important just building up those professional relationships with your peers. And either you are going to struggle because you are maybe not at a level where you need to be yet, but that doesn't matter because these conversations will really help get you at a level where you do need to be that technical leader. Um, one of the biggest challenges that I see for a lot of new starters is that they're scared to give their opinion. And often they've got extremely good opinions because it is not clouded by, I'm used to doing things this way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get you. Yeah,
So
fresh
it's
eyes.
very interesting when you speak to new starters, because they just have a different way of looking at the problem that you're used to looking at. So very good having these conversations and just talking to people. At some point, maybe you're lucky and somebody recognizes your ability to make technically sound decisions. And technically sound decision doesn't mean that technically this is the most beautiful thing you can build. A technically sound decision really means that you're able to deliver value for the company. This is ultimately what it comes down to: is, are your decisions really having a business impact? It can be obviously technically good and have a business impact, but at the end of the day, business impact is a large thing. Where the technical aspect comes in is obviously your peers also need to support what you're doing. You'll have a hard time if you don't have peers supporting your work. So the technical leadership role, I often say to my teams that I expect everyone to be a leader, and that really just comes down to you're able to work through a problem and demonstrate that you understood the problem and you've found a way to technically solve it that your peers agree on. Now, moving to the management side, the way it happened for me was I was working at a different startup and we were growing until the manager who hired me went, okay, I've got way too many direct reports. We need to get another manager. They opened up the position internally. I applied, interviewed, and got the position. Now, very important, and honestly, I see a lot of businesses failing here, is that most people, myself included, do not know how to manage people when they
Yeah,
get their first
yeah.
job.
Yes, yes, yes.
I
I would
was
agree with you
very
there.
fortunate in that first job that I had very hands-on coaching. Um, and I quite literally had a people partner who used to sit down with me weekly. And because the company was still small, she would see the type of work I was doing and tell me, like, this is what you should have done there. This is how you could have approached this situation. And just be quite straightforward about what it is to be a manager.
Yeah.
Definitely, there are good courses out there on management. There's some good books. In fact, I had a book recommended to me today, so I'm going to give it a read. I can't remember offhand what it was called now. I would love to have said, but
Don't worry, it'll probably after we've had this discussion, it will be a couple of hours later and it will pop into your head then.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think ultimately, when you step into the people management space, the most difficult thing I found, and it's still to this day the most difficult thing, is that some conversations are really hard and you cannot shy away from those conversations. It is almost what the job is about, is having those hard conversations. It's
Yeah.
easy telling people when things are going well. It's quite difficult when you have to tell people things are not going well.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine. And the thing I wanted to touch on all of that as well, um, for yourself stepping into that more of that technical lead management, you mentioned, and what we talk about a lot as well at Career Companion is networking and how important that was to have your peers on your side and networking. I always love asking this question because everyone's different, but how did you go about building up a trusted network within your business? So, for example, say for example, it's my first time stepping into an office and somebody goes, "Okay, Sam, I've heard it all the time. I've got to go network." And then they look around and they're like, "How do I do that?"
Yeah, it is a hard one. The first thing is there are people already in the business who's got a voice that is higher than the other people's. The reality is that you need to align yourself with the decision makers in the business. Doesn't mean you have to always agree with their decisions, but it is important that you have conversations with these people, and that even if you don't agree with these people. So what I always say to my staff is like, I don't always agree with my boss. It's a reality. Um, I tell my boss what I see as risks. My boss will tell me either, okay, cool, I agree, let's change the plan, or look, I've also thought about that, and this is what you're still going to be doing. At the end of the day, we all
Yeah.
have a job, and we kind of have to do what our boss asks us to do.
Yeah.
um, the and hopefully, you do get some clout from your boss, especially if you are having frank conversations and open conversations about issues. But definitely you want to align yourself with the decision makers. Like if you're about to make a decision about something, talk to them because they will have some insights and you will start building up that reputation of I am actually seeking other people's input. And that's probably one of the most important things is that, don't make decisions in isolation. And probably also important is that a lot of the decisions that you end up making is not necessarily about, on the technical side, building the best possible solution, because no matter what you build, there's going to be bugs in it. Some of it is just finding the best possible compromise.
Yeah, no, perfect. Now, that sounds like a really good way to go about it. And then the question I wanted to ask, because for me, when I started doing my networking and all of that sort of stuff, was early on in my career when I was in the office 5 days a week. So, if I saw, like you said, I identified who the decision makers were and that sort of stuff. And if I saw them in the kitchen, I would just strike up a conversation and all of that. I noticed you joined your current company, Ivan, by the looks of it, just around the start of COVID. So I'm assuming a lot of it was remote. Did you find it challenging to build up more of a network in your current role, or how did you go about it?
To be honest, it was pretty easy at the time because everything was remote and everything was happening on Slack globally.
Yes.
So that was actually an advantage. It also helped that the company was only 42 people at the time, so you knew everybody. So definitely easier in a smaller business. And then kind of as the business is growing, you grow with the business. So you're in a position where you know a lot of the decision makers only because you worked so close with them early on. Um, but that being said, one of the biggest challenges around COVID was because one of the things I used to enjoy is actually just going to meetups, meeting people at meetups, even gave a couple of talks at meetups, and that is something that definitely fell away. There was a couple of online meetups, but I don't feel it ever had the same effectiveness as what you had of just putting people in a room.
Yeah, yeah. There was some online ones, but like you said, it wasn't the effect. And we recommend to everyone to go to meetups because myself and Yvette, we loved going to them, especially when I started recruitment. I had to recruit all these different verticals in tech that I had to learn, and it was an amazing thing just to, even if you're introverted and scared of talking to people, you can still go to a meetup and sit in the corner and still learn about everything around you and hope that somebody else comes up to you. But obviously, we always, encourage you to go up and say hi. But have you got any good meetups that you've been to recently?
Recently, no, I'll be honest, I've been quite out of the meetup space. Ivan is actually running one quite regularly these days, which is the open source data infrastructure. I should know the name, I don't.
No, no,
So,
no. Would they go to the website to find that out, or is it on meetups.com?
so we normally advertise it on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So that's one place, and the next one I believe will be held at the Microsoft Reactor. Hasn't been confirmed yet, but I know there are talks about it.
Exciting. And going back to a bit of your career, so obviously you were in and out of, I guess, that sort of developer, technical lead. You've done some a development manager as well, team lead. So at one point you've gone from developer to team lead, and then you've sort of gone back on the tools. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What made you make that decision and then reverse that decision again and get back into people?
Um, well, I mean, ultimately it comes down to opportunity. And one of the things that made me go back into IC was I had an opportunity to relocate to Australia, and I was like, okay, well, let's relocate and see how that goes. So I went back into IC role, and then opportunity kind of happened again, and I had an opportunity to lead my own team at the business. And then there was another startup in Sydney, and that looked good. But to get in there, I had to join as an IC, and I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll do that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then that didn't work out, and then I joined Ivan. So it's really, I've got a very good friend who always he's got an interesting view on tech management, and I like his view, which is it is a bit of a continuum. To be a decent tech manager, you do need to understand a certain level of the tech. And he believes that as a tech manager, you've got to be willing to kind of dive back into the tech for a bit at a time. He says you don't have to go as deep as everybody else, but it is good actually just writing some code, reading some books, and understanding what it is that everybody else is going through. One of the things that I still do, not as much as I used to, but is I still go on call because I like knowing what sort of issues SREs are facing out in production. And people can talk about it and you can kind of get an idea, but actually going out there and spending an 8 hour shift and going, okay, that was pretty tough or that wasn't so bad gives you pretty good insights into what's happening. So how did this happen? I guess probably a little bit of just my own curiosity of what is it that's happening down there. I don't think that you have to be super technical to be a successful manager, but for myself, I've quite liked staying hands-on and understanding the technical side a bit deeper than maybe what the job actually requires.
No, I think that's great, and it also gives you an insight of a bit of empathy as well to know, hey, look, I know I'm asking you all to do this. Don't worry, I know what it takes to do it. I've done it. I still do it now. It may seem a bit bad, but it unfortunately has to get done. I know if I had a manager like that, it would give that sort of level of respect of, oh, okay, he knows exactly what he's talking about. He's been in the trenches. I'll go there as well.
Yeah, I mean that's my take on it as well. It adds a bit more authenticity to your opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. And for people out there who are going, look, they want to get into a similar role that you're in, from a responsibility point of view, how many people are you responsible for right now?
Right now it's 46 globally.
Wow. And how do you go about managing? Because a lot of people are talking nowadays about flexibility, having, time to ourselves and really switching off. Do you find that quite difficult to manage with it being some global people you're looking after when it comes to time zones?
And I'm not gonna lie, it is difficult.
Yeah.
My work hours are odd.
Yeah.
Um, I did mention to you that it's difficult for me doing kind of anything after 5 p.m. Normally between 5 and depending on the day, it could be anything from 5 till about 11. I'm busy, or just kind of intermittently busy. I do try and keep my day quiet between 6 and 8. I'm like, okay, cool. This is not just guaranteed family time.
Yeah.
um, but it can be challenging. And I do block out time in my calendar and go, okay, I'm absolutely not available. unless unless the whole world is burning, then please do contact me. But otherwise, yeah, it can be challenging. This morning, my first meeting was at 6:45. Tomorrow morning, I've got one at 6 a.m. So
Wow.
it it does get weird. But that is because it's a global business, and because of this particular position, it just unfortunately is the way it is. But for myself, it actually works quite well. I like having time to myself in the afternoon. Honestly, when it comes to work-life balance, what I'm trying very hard to do is that when I am done with work, I am really done with work. I just put it all to the side. I am pretty much always on call, so my phone is always with me, but knock on wood, it hasn't rung yet.
We probably just jinxed you, so apologies. But no, like you said, I think that's a good thing to consider when people are, stepping up into these roles to really make sure that they question, okay, well, what is my life going to look like moving forward if it is a global role? But then it could be advantages. Like you said, you've got the afternoons free. For me personally, I like surfing. So, I mean, that'd be great. I could go surfing in the afternoon. And then when it's dark, when I can't surf, I'm working. So it could be really good for some people, but then not so good for others. So definitely a really good thing to reflect on if you ever get the opportunity, I guess.
Absolutely. And I mean, especially today, jobs are offering weirdly different levels of flexibility. I mean, for me personally, that is something that I definitely consider when looking at work today is like, what is the expectation of work hours? Because I guess 4 years ago, we were all very used to, it's kind of 7 till 7 flexi hours, somewhere in there. But I don't think this is the case anymore. It seems to be people are a lot more serious about, on these days and these hours, you do have to be in a certain location. And then, of course, you still have other companies like GitLab. It's like, well, as long as you're available kind of during these hours, we're okay with it. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
I definitely, I'm all about, working for companies that understand, output driven, who aren't micromanaging the, really little like hours that you're in. But I was having this reflection with somebody the other day, but when you're early on in your career, I think it's very important to go into the office, like you said, so you can have those networking opportunities, those learning opportunities. Once you've been through all of that, it's kind of nice to not have to go into the office every single day. But I think it's quite important. Like, do you see that within your teams with, I guess, the younger generation coming through? Do you feel like if they're not going into the office as much, it's harder for them to go through that learning curve? Or is there now stuff that you've put in place through technology to overcome that?
So, mixed answers. It depends on the individual, which I know is not helpful at all.
No,
But
no.
definitely what I have observed with remote work is that people will suffer in silence and they will struggle to get the work done. They'll come to stand up and you won't really understand where they are. They will make you, I guess, almost create a sense of that I'm okay when they're actually not. And it's interesting because definitely if you're in the office, I believe a peer would see that you're struggling and help you. And certainly this was my experience when I was a junior, is that there were people that were willing to go, hey, I see that you're still on this thing, let me help you. Where with remote work, people are more likely to keep quiet. And you know, ultimately you want to get ahead of this and you don't want to end in a position where you now have to performance manage people because at that point it's way too late already. So, if anything, it's more responsibility on the managers now to ensure that people are on board and just capture people from, well, I guess save them from themselves. It's hard to know what the expectation is on yourself when you don't see your peers in person. And if you're a junior person or starting out and you're working from home, then I guess you're in an office where you're the only junior person. So it's very difficult actually realizing that whatever you're struggling with, chances are it's not just you, it's probably some senior staff as well.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's really insightful, and I think you got some good sort of ways around it, which is great. And I think the main lesson from that, no matter what level that you're at, if you're struggling, just speak up. Just jump on a Teams call, Slack message, anything you can. So, no, that's great. Look, Leon, thank you so much for all your time today. It's been fantastic getting to know how you got to where you are and what you're doing right now. What we'll do is we'll head over to the interviewer insights and get a look behind everything you do when it comes to hiring. So thank you again.
Cool, thanks, Sam.